Our adventure starts at the Derby Wharf and Boat Ramp, a facility for the export of minerals mined upstream along the Fitzroy River.
Okay, so this is dead low tide pretty much. Way down, you can see this big concrete pole. The water goes almost to the top when it's high tide. We've got the end of the boat ramp and a long way up. You have to go over the boat ramp at full tide. Okay, so we're at about 8 metres of tide as the water coming in. It's going to come all the way up to here. 10 metres is behind us, 10 metre tide. And you can see just how fast it is moving. We do not want to be trying to get past that pole or over this when it's moving that fast. See by the sidewalks movement of that barge what the bloody current is like. Wow.
We allowed 5 hours to prep the boat, including the loading of 330 litres of fuel. In the end, this was only just enough time to allow the launching of the boat at high tide.
Inflatables down there. Me and Lyndall have just arrived to give us a hand. Let's put the last of the fuel on.
After launching in the late afternoon, we initially anchored, but due to the strong tidal run, we elected to take one of the empty moorings at dusk to avoid the possibility of our anchor dragging. We depart at 4 AM in the morning at Derby to catch the outgoing tide across King Sound. To cross King Sound, working the tides is critical. We pushed against the last 30 minutes of incoming tide at Derby before running with the tide towards Port Usborne 40 nautical miles away. Even running with the tide, we expected to push against the tide in the last 30 minutes before reaching Port Usborne, where you can finally get out of the tidal flow. Even with a 15-knot wind on the stern quarter, we had to add the motor to make the distance before the tide turned and strengthened too much against us. Helen making her log for the day to record where we've been and when and how. And we've just got into Port Usborne. Around that point there, the tides were nice and strong. We slowed down to just under 4 knots with the engine going flat out. Port Usborne's a great little spot to stop before you go in the inland sea. The current actually doesn't get into Port Usborne, so once you turn the corner, you're actually quite sheltered in here from the current. And you can't go that far into the bay, but it's a good anchorage with a good bottom. And the entrance to the inland sea is just around the neighbouring point there, which we'll be doing in about an hour's time. Slackwater into the inland sea is around 2 hours after the tide at Port Usborne. We head for an unnamed island in the inland sea that has fond memories for me from a previous trip. We affectionately call it Corella Island for the two corellas that roost on the dead tree at its top each night. The island makes a great anchorage in strong southeast winds. The mud bank dries in spring tides, perfect for a trailer sailor. A natural spa forms at the water's edge on the beach on each rising tide. No swimming here though, we've been told that an 18-foot croc calls this beach home. Another beautiful sunrise on the inland sea. So here we are at the inland sea, beautiful spot, first stop out of King Sound. And we're at the moment, we've just come over to an area that has little replicas of the Black Mountain you find in Cooktown that are scattered along the coast here. And we're currently anchored behind what we call Corella Island for the two corellas that sit on the dead tree right at the top of it each night. But beautiful spot and very interesting. We decide to take the dinghy up the Trent River to explore and to fish. First crocodile for the trip, only about 2.5 metres, but
Always makes you a bit nervous when you see your first one.
Here's the fisherman of the family. What a queenie. Fish too.
Well, we've left our first anchorage in the inland sea and we're now heading off to Combe Bay. The forecast for this morning was less than expected, so, well, the forecast wasn't, but the wind is. So we're heading off to Combe Bay via Hell's Gate.
Exiting the inland sea on the way to Hell's Gate, we get our first taste of Kimberley whirlpools and currents. Hell's Gate is a narrow pass that must be negotiated at slack water. We aim to reach the pass at low water, Sunday Island, which is the closest tide station to the area. Passing through Hell's Gate, the slack water we were expecting was still ebbing, giving an exciting ride through with Naringa hitting 12 knots ground speed at times. We pass Crawford Bay and head into Combe Bay, home to both pearl leases and fish farms. The fish farm around Alcatraz Island has grown since my last visit to the area and specialises in farmed barramundi.
So here we are coming into the anchorage in Combe Bay. We got through Hell's Gate pretty well. Got there at slack water, but there was still an outgoing tide, probably due to the strong southeasterly winds in King Sound. Now we're going to come into this anchorage which I've been to before. It's a beautiful little anchorage in amongst the islands, and we'll stay here either just today or maybe another day if we really like it.
On a previous trip I encountered an 18-foot croc in this bay. Tracks on the beach would suggest large crocs still frequent the area. Another early start to catch the ebb tide to Hidden Island, Silica Beach. Safety harnesses and jacklines were the order of the day whenever working forward of the cockpit.
How you going, Bandit?
I'm fine, thank you. Protecting my delicate face.
Well, we've left Combe Bay and we're on our way to Silica Beach or Hidden Island. And one thing we're finding with the Kimberley is that there's a lot of motor sailing to make the tide. For example, today we had about 5.5 hours from dawn until the tide changes at Hidden Island, and because of that we've had to motor to maintain a certain speed. But mind you, once you get into the currents, I mean the currents make a huge difference. We're only sailing at about 4 knots at the moment, but we're actually going through the water at about 6.6 knots, so we're making up time by using the currents as well.
Silica Beach is named for its fine white sand, which along with its azure waters make it a picture-perfect location. The cruising guide suggests it is possible to walk south across Hidden Island to witness Whirlpool Pass. In its current state, that would be a major undertaking with thick spin effects and many kilometres of boulder-strewn landscape to traverse. Silica Beach is one of the few places in the Kimberley it's considered safe enough to swim in salt water. With its fine white sand and its clear water at high tide, a careful eye will spot any approaching danger from a croc from some distance away.
Beautiful sunsets, gorgeous scenery.